Before we begin, just a quick reminder to all of our new viewers, make sure to watch this entire video for today's trivia question and leave your answer in the comments below for a chance to win our daily giveaway. Remember, in order to win, you must be a subscriber, so hit that subscribe button right now, and while you're at it, click that bell icon to get notified of new videos right to your inbox. WCW still provides great entertainment for longtime and new fans alike watching the product on the WWE Network. The WCW pay-per-views and episodes of Monday Night Nitro add a valuable part of the library to the network that gives fans a reason to pay a monthly subscription. Many names like Sting and Ric Flair prove history right, with their legendary runs still holding up today. Underrated talents to become future stars like Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and Chris Jericho showed that they were the best performers in the industry on the WCW undercard. However, the library isn't as kind to some of those other stars from the 90s. And now here's a list of WrestleFact's top 10 most overrated WCW superstars. The WCW Championship was usually associated with truly credible names until Vince Russo came in and turned it into a joke. Before that point, however, the names of the wrestlers to hold the title were almost always legitimate top stars. One name that stands out for the wrong reasons was The Giant. Of course, we all know him today as the Big Show for his time in the WWE, but he was far less ready for his big spot in WCW. Giant made his debut in WCW without any experience wrestling in front of crowds, and WCW still introduced him as a main eventer to feud with Hulk Hogan. The Giant did a good job trying to show his athleticism, but everything else he did was horrible. And the spot was too big for him, and WCW's locker room stunted his progression. It led to him having one of the most overrated WCW careers. Hugh Morris held a roster spot in World Championship Wrestling for the majority of the Monday Night Wars and really only received a push at the end of the company's tenure. WCW officials loved Morris's toughness and size along with his agility, and at the time not many big men in the sport could pull off a wide variety of moves like Morris to include an impressive moonsault. Then, almost as if by fate, Morris finally received a push during the final days of WCW after a lot of the top talent left the company for the WWE. Morris's mediocre rise to fame was short-lived, with his only major contributions to WCW ultimately leading to a forgettable feud with Lance Storm, followed by boring matches and segments. After the closing of WCW, the WWE hired him to serve as a head trainer with the WWE Performance Center, but that also turned out to be a nightmare for him, with the WWE releasing him eventually for allegedly abusing trainees. World Championship Wrestling signed Hacksaw Jim Duggan as a former WWE superstar in the hopes that he would attract new viewers to their shows. However, Jim Duggan never really was a top main event act and failed to make any noticeable difference in the ratings. As lovable as he can be, Hacksaw was already over the hill and didn't have what was needed to make an impact during the Monday Night Wars. WCW officials were so unimpressed with his work that they rarely placed him on Monday Nitro or pay-per-view events. Duggan was relegated to work Saturday Night and Thunder events for the majority of his tenure until the end when the company started to lose talent. In his autobiography, Duggan claimed that he was responsible for successful ratings in his rare Nitro spots, but that's just a lie. The legend wore out his welcome and had very little to offer the company. Curt Hennig, who was also known as Mr. Perfect in the WWE, is arguably one of the greatest in-ring performers in professional wrestling history. Unfortunately, though, his talent was vastly overshadowed when he joined WCW. Hennig shocked the wrestling world when he joined World Championship Wrestling and almost became a member of the Four Horsemen, but then suddenly turned his back on Ric Flair, becoming a member of the New World Order. However, at this point, the NWO was already losing steam, and he quickly fell into the role of a secondary player that got lost in the shuffle. Eventually, Hennig would be rebranded with a cowboy gimmick and then just disappeared. Known for spectacular in-ring work, his matches also failed to deliver, with forgettable outings against fellow legends like Bret Hart and Ric Flair. Curt Hennig's time in WCW was a circumstance of the environment, but it made his run overrated by association. Everyone thinks of greatness when they think of Curt Hennig, but his WCW run was anything but great and could be argued as one of the worst periods of time in his professional wrestling career. This may come as a shock to some, but nostalgia has allowed us all to enjoy the presence of Goldberg in WWE today. That makes it easy to forget just how overrated he was during the 90s. Goldberg entered the business with the greatest push in professional wrestling history. WCW officials booked him with an undefeated streak just to make him a star by having him dominate every other person on the roster. Goldberg rarely wrestled competitive matches though, and the rare ones that he would do exposed him. WCW's library would show that Goldberg struggled in matches longer than 5 minutes. His one-dimensional character also made him a weak promo worker. Everything had to be booked around him, or he would have a tough time. Unless you enjoy watching 2-minute matches, there's no need to look back at Goldberg's WCW career. The successful monster left behind a very overrated run. WCW employed Buff Bagwell for a decade and gave him every chance to make it to the top of the roster. Bagwell had the look and presence that was most important to those in the business during the 90s. However, his talent did not match the the physique. Buff was a disaster in the ring and had a horrible attitude that also held him back in many respects. His ego saw him become a negative presence in the locker room and someone many of the other stars did not want to work with. He also had the reputation of being one of the wrestlers that just loved collecting a big paycheck and refusing to work hard, which haunts Bagwell to this day. No one received as many opportunities and failed more times as Buff Bagwell did during the Monday Night Wars. Scott Hall's early role in WCW saw him play a huge part in taking the company to the next level. Hall was the perfect person to start the rise of the New World Order by surprising the world with his WCW debut. Hall was also a creative genius, and not many people know that he was actually the brains behind the Sting character. For a time, Hall was the best all-around performer during the early days of the NWO, but then he dropped off dramatically. Sadly, Scott Hall's addiction to drugs and alcohol saw his in-ring work crash and burn. His career hit a massive decline as he gave less impressive performances and incoherent promos. Eventually, WCW had to put him on the bench after multiple incidents of him being sent home from the road due to various behind-the-scenes incidents. Scott Hall's last few years in WCW damaged his legacy, and it led him to becoming one of the most overrated wrestlers in the industry during that time. Jeff Jarrett was the prototypical mid-card heel during the Monday Night Wars. He bounced back and forth between the WWE and WCW, who employed him multiple times each. However, Jarrett didn't have that special it factor that either company needed, and he was not particularly great at anything. His matches were subpar, his promos were boring, and he never really had any major feuds that led to pay-per-view buys or ticket sales. However, one thing that he did have going for him was that WCW executive Vince Russo loved him and tried to make him a focal point of WCW towards the end of the company's existence. For the first time, Jarrett would receive the spotlight and become a main event heel. This led to him winning the WCW Championship on multiple occasions. However, in hindsight, it's obvious that he was vastly overrated, even by WCW standards, and didn't really deserve that top spot on TV. This just goes to show how bad things in WCW really were at the time. One person that WCW believed in due to his look was Lex Luger, but that's pretty much all he brought to the table. Sure, his physique was amazing, but nothing else about him seemed to impress anyone. Lex Luger rarely had any good matches, as he was unable to keep up with the better wrestlers in WCW. On top of that, he had absolutely no charisma. His promos were horrible. Think about it, can you remember anything about his run in WCW other than popping up on the first episode of Monday Night Nitro as a surprise? I didn't think so. However, WCW still pushed Luger to the moon and made him one of the faces of the organization during his time with the company. Lex Luger lacked a true passion for this business. His career is one that especially stands out as overrated, as we can now look back years later and see many of WCW's great wrestlers making his run look even worse by comparison. When WCW signed Hulk Hogan to a multi-million-dollar contract, it was with the sole purpose of bringing ratings to WCW and to rebrand the company around him. It's fun to look back with nostalgia to see what Hulk Hogan would eventually become in WCW, but what most people forget is that he absolutely tanked during his first few years with the company. Fans just didn't care about his stale babyface character anymore, and for the time, WCW was considering pulling the plug on Hogan and cutting their losses. It was only through a stroke of pure genius, or maybe just dumb luck, that Hulk Hogan turned heel to officially form the New World Order. At first, Hogan's heel character was the hottest thing in professional wrestling, partially because no one expected him to turn heel, and also because it was just so damn believable. Hogan did a great job with his heel Hollywood Hogan character, but eventually, that also started to become stale. The NWO became repetitive, and we went right back to remembering just how subpar Hogan was at the time. Also, during this period of time, Vince McMahon was struggling to survive, so he was forced to push exciting wrestlers like Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and Steve Austin, and the fans started to take note. For the first time in nearly 2 years, WWE began to beat WCW in the ratings. Rather than learn from their mistakes, WCW did the complete opposite of what WWE was doing, and instead of pushing new stars and angles, they stuck with Hulk Hogan. The fans quickly took note, and they turned the channel, eventually leading to the death of WCW and the belief amongst many in the wrestling world that Hulk Hogan was the big cause of it. And now it's time for our WrestleFacts giveaway trivia question. Today's prize is... Make sure to leave your answer in the comments below and check back on our next video to see if you're a winner. Remember, only subscribers can win, so what are you waiting for? Subscribe! Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time here on WrestleFacts.